Congratulations. So see if we can continue doing that. Okay? It's not an easy lesson. This.
I felt like I needed to turn my head a bit.
Why did you?
Yeah.
Good. Great. What do we say again and again? But always, so have the rest, Martine, and come back. So you don't want to turn your head. The instructions are for a particular, to evoke a particular pattern, organisation, whatever. So if you turn your head, have a rest, come back. If it's early enough in the lesson, hopefully you realise you've turned your head to the wrong side and you prefer to do the other side, that's another, okay. Now, on the stomach, you're asked to turn your head to one side. Martine wanted to turn her head frequently from one side to the other, which is...
When I was lifting, I felt like it would help me less strain on my neck if I turned my head more. Every time I was lifting, I turned my head a little bit more straight, and I found it was straining my neck less.
Okay.
So just to clarify, so when you're lying in the stomach and your head's turned one way, it's okay to be rolling that head in that direction or keeping it still? It's definitely quite hard to me.
Yeah, and I'm not quite sure what your question is. I asked you a lot of questions. There is no right way. It's noticing what's happening for you, and in that, judging, sensing, listening whether you're following the instructions. The shift in your habits of organisation of your extensors can occur. When you were asked to lift your head at one point in time, you weren't given any specific instruction as to whether to keep your head turned when it lifted or let it turn down. Martine found it helped her to let her head turn down. It may not be true of others. But if you feel that keeping your head to one side is uncomfortable for you, then rest and change it and then come back. Because they're a challenge. Please roll over and lie on your stomach again. Organize yourself in your X. So, if you can, your arms are... So some people have their arms at right angles. Just know that your arms are at right angles if they are. The idea is to be towards an X. So more of an X would be that. This is more of don't know. Letter of the alphabet doesn't come into my head at the moment. Y. Yeah. Yeah. A squarish Y. And stay with the same diagonal. And could you press your wrist and then let that go? And as you press your wrist, notice what lifts. Just do it lightly and easily. So it was interesting, I was in a training program recently in another country, and after doing a lesson not unlike this, one student said she had this profound discovery that to her, pressing meant hard. So what's the smallest, invite you to find out, what's the smallest amount of pressing that you know has influenced your contact with the floor of your wrist, that your wrist is moving in that direction? Could that be pressing? So it's forming the attention and sensing. What do you do as you do that? Can you press your elbow and then let that go? And the letting go, there could be other words that describe that better for you. It could be, and stop pressing. It could be press and unpress. Or press and return to neutral. As you press and stop pressing, what lifts? As you press, what lifts? Do you notice what lifts? Or maybe you notice what lifts, what lowers as you stop pressing your elbow. Press your shoulder toward the floor. Observe, how do you organize yourself to move, to press your shoulder? Does your shoulder have to make contact with the floor in order for you to know you're pressing it in that direction? But it's in that direction. Maybe it presses, maybe it doesn't. And now repeat that with your wrist, press, unpress. Your elbow, press, unpress. Your shoulder, press and let go. Press and release. Go along your arm several times, finding what it out, how you organize to press, where else through you lifts as you press, what lifts elsewhere, and can you clarify what pressing means to you? Can you notice, as your intention is to press your wrist or your elbow or your shoulder, what does it mean to press one part, but still notice that other parts are influenced by that intention? Does your hand need to lift as you press your wrist? Maybe. Maybe not. So you're finding out your response to pressing. Is it necessary? And now let your arm lie and begin to press down your diagonally opposite leg. Press the foot and release that. Really take your time to observe the dissipation, the letting go, the changing of the contact that happens both as you press and as you release. And as you press, what else lifts? So your foot, your knee, your hip. Press and release your foot. Press your knee, let go. Press the front of your hip joint, or whatever you think of as your hip joint, and let go. Just several times up and down your leg, hip, knee, foot, foot, knee, hip. And then the diagonally opposite shoulder, elbow, wrist, wrist, elbow, shoulder. And leave it and roll over onto your back. How do you sense the diagonal that we've been working with compared to the other diagonal? How does the diagonal you've been working with, the line of that leg, the line of that arm, contact the floor compared to the other diagonal? And please roll over and return to your stomach again. Organize yourself in the same way, lying in your X, with adjustments to make the position as comfortable as you can for the moment. Same diagonal. Can you press the shoulder towards the floor and then let it go? And then press the diagonal hip joint and then release it. And where would the middle place be? The connection between, along the diagonal line between your shoulder and your hip. Can you press the middle? And then press your hip joint, middle, shoulder, middle, hip. And begin to shift your leaning place from your shoulder to the diagonally opposite hip, along the diagonal line crossing your middle. And so you can maybe the pressing here feels more like a wave or a ripple. You know, when you drop a pebble into a still water, that rippling out, changing as the wave moves the water particles in the ever-creasing circle. So you can make it distinct, like press and let go. Press, notice what lifts next. And maybe that place that lifted is the next place that presses. Or maybe you roll the pressure along that line from your hip joint to your shoulder to your hip joint. Okay. And then rest a moment. Please come back to the same position and begin to press first your hand or your wrist, same diagonal, then your elbow, then your shoulder, across the diagonal down to the opposite hip joint, then your knee, then your foot, and then reverse back up along that diagonal. Feeling the wave of pressure shift across yourself. Noticing how your weight shifts on the ground. And perhaps it becomes more like a ripple effect. Something presses, something lifts. And you're passing the movement through yourself along this diagonal in an ever-changing wave of pressure. It's possible to follow the sequence of your pressing and lifting. And as you lift one part, noticing where is it that lifts? Is it the place just behind or the place ahead? Okay. Pause a moment. And then slowly begin to lengthen and lift your arm and leg of that diagonal and rock a little. So once they're lifted, keep them lifted. And then rock so that as your leg lifts, your arm lowers. You can lift your head as well. And as your arm lifts, your leg lowers. And feel how you're moving across the middle of yourself now. See, your hand doesn't need to be stiff. Your wrist could hang. Once your arm's in the air, you don't need to stiffen your fingers. Your hand could hang down. Your arm could be soft in this shape. Can you sense your other diagonal as you do this? Let it go, roll onto your back, and rest. You know, there can be this moment in awareness through movement classes where you're laying the seeds, so to speak. It's challenging. It's difficult. It may even be uncomfortable to some people. And there's not much happening. But then the work, Moshe's design of the lessons and the way our nervous system functions is such that the lesson itself, if you imagine, stay in there, create shifts with surprising outcomes. So that time it was like, oh yes, I could see movement all over the room instead of one or two little bodies beginning to be able to do something. So it gets more possible. It seems impossible to begin with. It becomes possible. Not easy, but possible. And then gradually, as it becomes more familiar to you and there are more pieces of the puzzle that join together, it gets easier. Some lessons get easier sooner than others, and that can influence our choice of lessons with the general public. Let's notice, was it a little easier for you then to rock yourself across that diagonal? Lie yourself in an X on your back this time. And begin, first of all, notice your contact. And then begin to press along the same diagonal. You can go out here. So take your arm out to the side. Further. Yep. Now put it down. Okay. I would.
So it's more uncomfortable here.
More uncomfortable. Yeah. Take your head out and put it down. Is that too uncomfortable for your head? Yeah. So, Ruth, you there? Put your head down. Hand down. Just need a little assistance in getting some arms comfortable. that? Ruth? Hello. She's in her X. It's all right. Is that?
I need to have that in that direction.
Yes, but it's too stretched. It's too tall. Too much work going on. It's unbend. So maybe you need it here, but you need to soften your arms. Can you help her get comfortable for me? So can you begin to press along the same diagonal? Press the back of your hand and let it go. Press your elbow and let it go. Your shoulder a little bit towards the floor and let it go. Just sensing how you mobilize yourself to press each part that you bring along, you move your attention to along that diagonal toward the floor, and then let it go. And then move down to your diagonal leg. Thanks, Ruth. Press your heel a little and let go. If anyone feels like they're really uncomfortable in their arms, just raise your hand. Ruth will come and give you a little hand. Okay, great. Press your heel, let go. Back of your knee, and let go. So it's more than just pressing your heel. It's about how you sense your response, how you go about pressing, and how you sense the response through yourself, along that diagonal, elsewhere, along the length of that diagonal. And press your hip backward and let go. So here, how do you press your hip backwards? What do? You tense your buttock? Do you tilt your pelvis? Do you contract your abdominal muscles? So each press, follow what you're doing in order to press. Pause, bring your arms down, bend your knees if you need, rest a moment. Then come back to the same position. And now, this time press your shoulder several times. So you press, you release. Feeling which part of your back of your shoulder increases its contact with the floor. And let go. Noticing what happens along your diagonal in the direction of your opposite hip, what happens in the middle of you. And now press your hip several times. Pausing in between each press and noticing what happens in the middle. Several times. Press the middle place between your shoulder and diagonal hip to the floor and release. Then press hip, let go. Middle, let go. Shoulder, and let go. Can you make that clearer? as you press along that diagonal, shoulder, middle, hip, hip, middle, shoulder, what happens to your arm and leg on that diagonal? Have any sense of them getting lighter or heavier? Try pressing that middle place. And as you press it, lighten your arm and leg a little bit. And then as you unpress, let your arm and leg settle on the floor. Can you find ways of pressing your middle that might lighten your arm and leg? Just imagine that you wanted to touch your hand and your foot towards one another. Don't do it. But what would you need to do along that diagonal in the middle of you in order to lighten that arm and leg so they could come together in an arc above you? Rest a moment. And come back into that same position. And several times press along that diagonal. From your heel to your hand, across your middle, from your hip to your shoulder, each place, pressing, letting go, and pressing the next place and letting go. And as something presses, somewhere else lifts. And for some of us, it's easier to notice the pressing, and others it's the unlifting, not even necessarily the lifting. But each time you press and lift a part of yourself along that diagonal, try and get clearer about what's pressing and where are you lifting. And in the places where it's less clear, can you do less? Make it smaller. Notice what's happening along your other diagonal as you do this. Then again, try pressing your middle place and lifting the arm and leg of the same diagonal. How much of that middle line between your shoulder and your hip do you press in order to get a sense that it lightens your arm and your leg? Has it got anything to do with that crossing place of your two diagonals? And what happens with your opposite diagonal? Can you press your opposite hand and foot into the floor as you lift the diagonal leg and arm that you've been working with? Exploring. And does that make any difference? Does it help? Does it give you a feeling that the arm and leg gets lighter or not? Let it go. Rest. So what sense of yourself do you have after working with a particular diagonal idea? I mean, we don't actually have diagonal bones in this direction, but we have the possibility of organizing ourselves functionally with diagonal pathways. For many people, the patterns that form these particular connections are often lost as the movements in the center of the trunk, the torso, are lost, not used. And our back doesn't have the fine sensory discrimination that our hands do, that our feet does, that our mouth does. So in forming this way of pressing and relating to the floor, it's possible it's helping you clarify your image of what's back there. And not only what's back there, but how the front of yourself is connected to what's back there. Please roll yourself onto your stomach again, lying the same way in a big X. See what it's like now to lengthen and lift the arm and leg that of the diagonal you've been working with, and let them come down to the floor again. Is it any clearer for you? I certainly see more action on the floor, but it's not about action or amount of movement. It's about sensing yourself, making something that felt impossible become a little more possible. Try several times. Lift, hold that diagonal in the air, and begin to rock yourself so that as you lift your arm higher, your leg lowers. As your leg lifts, your arm lowers. Feel how the middle of you needs to shift on the floor. And this is something we spend hours and hours working out as babies. And as adults, through our experiences, our hobbies, our life, whatever, we forget how to use our abdomen, how to use our back in ways that actually potentiate or enable us to access the power of our pelvis and our back. Great. Rest when you need to. Babies at about, it varies, but 3, 4, 5 months, particularly around, 6, 7, they start to fly on their stomach. They lift everything away from the floor and they'll rock left and right and they'll rock headward and footward. They're in the processing of really sensing how to move and control their trunk, shift on the ground, become mobile. And yet, for all sorts of reasons, sedentary occupations, not understanding how we can use ourselves, injuries or whatever, often we lose that sense of power and freedom, which is why it can be so appealing for people wanting that balance, degrees of freedom, vitality. Rest on your stomach. And just imagine lifting your other diagonal. How clearly can you imagine from the sensations that you've experienced the rocking of your other diagonal, the lengthening and lifting of your arm, lengthening and lifting of your leg, can you press, begin to press and unpress along that diagonal? You can keep your head turned the same way or turn it the other way or vary it, whatever you like. So start with your arm or start with your leg, pressing your wrist, pressing the elbow and letting it go. Pressing your shoulder toward the floor, feeling how you do it, and let it go. So is the quality of your attention to yourself a little different now? Now that the action has been clarified a little bit on the other side, then do the same with your leg, diagonally opposite leg. Hip, press, let go. Knee, press, let go. Foot, as something presses, what lifts? And then between your hip and your shoulder, press and let go your shoulder several times, then your hip several times. Listening, sensing, feeling, thinking. What's happening elsewhere? Listening to the feedback of the pressure. Of the quality of pressure. And then shoulder, middle place, hip. Middle place, shoulder. So clarify, pressing along that diagonal. Just notice, to begin with, is it clearer or less clear? How does it influence the organization of your arm and leg on that diagonal in relationship to the floor? And please begin to travel from your hand, down your arm, from your shoulder to your hip and down your leg and back up again along that diagonal. Feeling the rippling wave, the pressing, the letting go or the unpressing. How do you mobilize yourself to have that wave the pressing and releasing that gradually can become more like a wave of shifting pressure across the front of yourself. Rest on your stomach for a moment. And please come back again to the X on your stomach. Think of that diagonal line from the hand to the foot that you've been exploring. Can you press the middle place toward the floor and let go? Feel how that influences the shoulder of that diagonal and the hip of that diagonal. While you press that middle place, think of lengthening your arm and leg on that diagonal and unweighting them a little bit on the floor. So first the feeling of moving the hand and the foot away from one another, the elbow and the knee away from one another, while you press that middle place to the floor. And then when you have a sense that it's possible, unweight your arm and leg on the floor and explore rocking across that diagonal. Feeling how the path of pressure moves across your middle as you lower your foot and leg and lift your arm, as you lower your arm and lift your leg. You'll all be babies soon. And then let it go, roll onto your back and rest. Please lie in your X again. Think of the line from your right hand to your left foot through the center of yourself. Your left hand to your right foot through the center of yourself. Notice how your diagonals are relating to the floor, where they cross through the middle of yourself. Then explore lifting the arm and leg of the second diagonal you explored, using what you learnt from the first side. Checking, does that help? Is it clearer or less clear? And what happens to the other diagonal? When you lift this diagonal, where through that line between your shoulder and your hip can you press the floor that helps you lighten your arm and leg along the diagonal of that diagonal? So it feels as if this middle place, what you do with that middle place is the lifting of your arm and leg on the diagonal is a consequence of that. That you initiate the movement there. A couple of times, lift that diagonal more, and then several times your other diagonal. You don't have to lift it high, but a feeling that the movement organizes from the center of yourself. Does it help to lift your head? As you lift one diagonal, does it help to press the other? Or does that confuse you? Okay, leave it, bring your arms down. And just take a moment to sense how you lie on the floor now. Imagine, sense, feel the line of your spine, the length of your spine, that middle line of you. Sense the line between your left shoulder and your right hip joint, your right shoulder and your left hip joint, where they cross in the middle. You sense them along the front of yourself. You sense them along the back of yourself. Can you sense them through yourself? Sense your breathing in that middle place where your lines cross. Feel how your volume changes there as you breathe in and as you breathe out. And then very slowly roll yourself to one side. Bring yourself up to sitting and up into standing. Notice your sense of standing now. How your arms are hanging, your sense of your diagonals, relationship between your right shoulder and your left hip, your left shoulder and your right hip. And then begin to walk. And notice what you sense of your diagonals as you walk. Is there any relationship between your right shoulder and your left hip, or your left shoulder and your right hip? And you feel that relationship. Is it possible to feel that relationship along the front side of yourself? And the back side of yourself? And begin to walk a little faster. A little quicker, it doesn't have to be hurrying. And just notice, maybe for some, it might be easier to sense this diagonal movement as you walk a little faster. Okay. Now I'm curious, that lesson can be difficult and leave some disquiet in the extensors of the lower back. So Maybe when you make your way back to your mat, you could just give me some indication of how many of you feel a little like you've worked in your lower back. 1, 2, 3. If you see me looking at you, then I'll know. Wave at me if you have. Disorganized, okay. 4.
I sort of feel toned throughout, basically, in a different way.
So yeah, but that's not disquiet or anything. So there are lots of people feeling it in lots of different places. Okay, so come and lie down on your back again. So if you were at home right now and you'd just done an ATM and you kind of felt like, I'm not sure if I like the lingering effect of that ATM, what would you do? Pardon?
Eat honey toast.
Sugar. Sugar. Universal answer. Carbs. Okay. Any other suggestions? Vegemite. Okay, we're all going for food, are we? I've got chocolate coated macadamia nuts here, if that'll help. Rolling. Valium. Hopefully not. Okay. So, rowing is one of those activities that can influence a lot of things. So, let's see, how would you roll? What are the ways you know how to roll? Holding the knees and rolling. Yep. So when you hold your knees and roll, I see some people holding the knees together. What about one hand on each knee and really letting the knees hang open so each leg can have its individuality and yet have some relatedness through the pelvis? Can you go slower? So I see rocking, like left, right, left, right. What about right, left? So you change the rhythm. You change the timing. Possibly other than your rhythm. What about bringing your knees a little closer to you? But opening your knees wider apart. Let your feet hang. Your knees, feet hang down near your buttocks. And as you come through the middle, if you're rolling to the right, you open your right knee to the right and feel the weight of your right leg. Opening your hip joint, pulling, inviting your pelvis to roll to the right. And because your pelvis begins rolling, your left leg starts traveling to the right, which draws your right shoulder, left shoulder to the right because your hand is connected to your knee. So in rolling like this, whether it's rolling holding your knees, rolling behind your knees, rolling holding onto your feet, it's a very connected action where the configuration and the position demands a connectivity because there's connection. How slowly can you do it? Could you find a way of doing it and be really reversible? So you listen to your breathing. So don't try and straighten your legs. Really hang out with your knees bent, your feet close to your buttocks. You can hold your feet so somebody's holding their feet, someone's holding their ankles. So in this lesson, can you sense how it's rounding your lower back a little bit? lengthening your extensors. It's giving you a very different feedback of the changing relationship of your back to the floor. Your head is being pulled along for the ride. This one would be good for you, Charlie. You just, okay. Okay, and rest a moment. And just notice after just a few minutes of that, do you like the feeling that you have more now? Mm-hmm. You like yourself more now? So now lie on your back, your knees bent. You can keep your knees over your abdomen if you want. But just take a few moments to think about the week. Reflect on the week. Some of the other ATMs you've been exploring. What were the highlights of the week for you? You know, it's always often one of the questions you get asked when you've been on a trip or you've traveled. What was your highlight of your trip? People want like this summation. But you can do a slideshow in your mind's eye of the highlights. Also include the lowlights, the challenges. How you responded to them. How you stayed with the process. Is it possible to respect yourself for that? To appreciate how you've met the challenges of the week, the challenges of yourself, the challenges of others. And if you're interested, just go back to some ATM that may come to mind. And just explore it a little bit, whatever it is. There's something you liked doing, you liked exploring. So you remember all those lessons of reaching round to hold the chin. I'm not suggesting you do that one necessarily. I'm just giving you a little reflection. And how at first it might have felt like you were in a straitjacket, and then gradually you learnt to roll to one side and roll to the other side and roll yourself up to sit. Eventually you're able to roll up to sit from over one side or up the other side, holding your head or not holding your head, feeling how your legs, your head and your pelvis were connected in a relationship that assisted your legs to find an organization. Perhaps you recall how the trajectory of your pelvis was paramount in the organization of your action. Maybe you remember crossing one leg over the other, tilting your knees to one side or the other. So often, when we've been immersed in something, it can take just a little cue and it comes back. Starts to return. And then you can use your thinking, your feeling, your sensing, your imagining, and explore. And as you explore and move a little, associations might occur, or something connects. You remember hugging yourself and rolling, or tilting the triangle of your arms. The impossibility of taking your triangle of your arms and the crossing of your legs to the same side at the same rate to begin with. You've travelled a ways this week. Remember sliding the feet to stand? Rolling the arms. The floor. Your colleagues in training, the conversations. You sense a difference in yourself this day to the first day. Perhaps you feel more comfortable in the room, more comfortable in yourself, or not. Remember different ways of coming up onto your feet, from standing going down to the floor, from lying, rolling to the side, to standing, to going down to the other side. So it's all these experiences that are reaching in to the innermost places of you, that will develop, build relationships, build connections within you, make links. And as Moshe said, and will emerge in moments that may surprise you in the near future and in the distant future. They'll come out of your embodied learning and you'll think, oh, I invented something, I created something. Let it go. Sense how you relate to yourself now and the ground now. And then take your time. Slowly roll to one side. Bringing yourself up to sitting and then up into standing. Take some moments in standing to just listen to how you organize yourself in standing now. Another shift or another after effect compared to after the last lesson. Yeah? Maybe that has something recognizable to when you do ATM at home. And you take that 5 minutes, you take that 10 minutes or 20 minutes or however much time you can find to either listen to a lesson or to do a process like this where you just imagine, think, play, explore. So walk around a little. Just notice if there's any lingering effect of those diagonals. If one's clearer than the other. And maybe you'll keep noticing them as you travel home. And I hope you have some time for rest over the weekend. And we'll see you on Monday. Now, in regards to the mats, if you could perhaps stack them at one end of the